Call Mike Nesbitt to conclude the debate on the motion.
Deputy Speaker, thank you very much. I very much welcome the debate and congratulate my colleagues John Dobson and Danny Kinahan for bringing it to the House. May I also thank all the members who have contributed to the debate over the course of the last hour. Of course, Deputy Speaker, I had hoped to be following a ministerial response today. Let me echo the sentiments expressed by Danny Kinahan. I think it's a matter of deep regret that despite the fact OFM DFM have no fewer than 4 ministers, all of whom I believe the Business Committee were told would be available today, that none has made it to the House. It's not just today. Of course, a fortnight ago, the SDLP brought forward a motion calling for the return of the Civic Forum, and again, OFM DFM were unable to supply even one of the 4 ministers to make a response. Sadly, I think it has to be recorded in Hansard, Deputy Speaker, this apparent disrespect for the House extends also to committees. The OFM DFM committee has had a run of 4 consecutive weeks when we've suffered either late papers or the cancellation of briefings by officials. On both the 6th and the 13th of March of this year, papers arrived very late, papers regarding the delivery by OFM DFM to their programme for government commitments, so core business, and yet some papers arrived just 2 hours before a committee meeting. On the 20th of March, officials who had been due to brief on the Child Poverty Action annual report cancelled, and on the 10th of April, officials again cancelled briefing the committee on the Older People's Strategy. We are, Deputy Speaker, of course, debating equality within the context of education, and hence the reference to OFM DFM. I believe it might be useful to give some context to the motion. Mention has been made during the course of the debate of the Single Equality Bill. The options for this bill were consulted on during direct rule, and the Minister with responsibility for equality, John Speller MP, issued a report as long ago as 2005, summarising the responses received. And those responses indicated a significant support for harmonising existing anti-discrimination legislation in Northern Ireland. And then, in a response to a written question tabled by my colleague Robin Swan in September last year, the First and Deputy First Minister said they currently have no plans to develop a single equality bill here. Well, the repeal of this certificate could easily be done as part of taking forward a single equality bill. May I also say, with regard to a sexual orientation strategy, Junior Minister Bell, on the 17th of September last, gave the Assembly, quote, a confirmation to have that draft ready and out for consultation by the end of 2012. Yet again, a strategy which has not come forward from the Office of the First and Deputy First Minister. As we've heard during the debate at Stranmillis, you cannot acquire the Certificate of Religious Education directly. Students there have to take a distance learning course from Glasgow University leading on to the certificate. A small number of students from Stranmillis do so, and this is funded by the Department of Employment and Learning. Therefore, we have a situation in which all the necessary teaching and support to gain employment in the maintained sector is offered by one of our university colleges, while students at the other must undertake a distance learning course to get the same qualification.
Thank the member for giving way. Given he's expressing a concern, then I would assume in relation to protecting teachers in the control sector, could he explain to the House why his party and his previous party leader, Lord Impey, actually aided and abetted and assisted the removal of the transferers from the Board of Governors of Stranmillis College, which has now left that college with no representation from the Protestant churches? Maybe in the interest of equality, he might revisit that issue as well.
I thank the member for his intervention. There is much in the past we can look to, Mr Story. There's much we can talk about in terms of policies reversed, Mr Story. We learn in politics never, 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 never is not necessarily what it is said to be. At Stranmillis, students therefore are at a clear disadvantage because when it comes to finding a teaching position, graduates at St Mary's can take up a post in any primary school in Northern Ireland as they will have that very certificate. On the 28th of November in 2011, in a statement to this House on teacher training, the Employment and Learning Minister, Stephen Farry, outlined that the situation could be addressed either through measures to remove the capacity for schools to require the certificate, or through ensuring fairer and more ready access for students to the certificate across all institutions. Another example, I would suggest, of discrimination in the area of teachers gaining employment through equality of opportunity. Mr Kinahan, in opening the debate, thanked Jeff Dudgeon and Austin Morgan for their sterling work in highlighting this issue. I would like to do the same. Mr Kinahan took us through the history of the issue and alerted us of his intention to bring forward an amendment to the Education Bill to address this issue. He also said that he is offering protection of 20% of teaching jobs requiring the certificate, the so-called 1 in 5 rule, consistent with the 1998 School Standards and Framework Act in England. As chair of the Education Committee, Mr Storey said some committee members rejected the notion that the certificate is discriminatory, but the majority felt it was unhelpful, especially with the move to more work in area planning. And as DUP education spokesman, he felt the focus should be on the Minister for Education as much as on OFM DFM, even though the member will be aware equality falls within the First Minister and Deputy First Minister's department. He supported the motion, even though he was at pains to articulate that their amendment had been rejected. For Sinn Féin, Mr Hazard said he welcomed the Ulster Unionists bringing equality into their thinking and their language. I must get Mr Hazard a copy of the Belfast Agreement, or maybe even direct him to the policies of Lord Londonderry, the First Minister for Education, in 1921. Mr Hazard seemed more concerned with ex-prisoners and same-sex marriage, but he did, in the end, say he would support the motion. For the SDLP, Sean Rogers said that he wished to praise our teachers as an asset in an increasingly multicultural society. He made the point that Stranmillis only offers distance learning on this course. He stressed the importance of sacramental issues and preparations, something protected, may I stress, by the 1 in 5 rule that Mr Kinahan proposes. And despite that, he said the SDLP will not support our motion. Chris Little said the Alliance Party does support the motion. He began by defining his party's position. He then took an intervention from my colleague Tom Elliott, who discovered an integrated primary school advertising a job where the certificate was essential. Mr Little did concede that there are issues with the certificate. He spoke in favour of greater integration and collaboration between sectors. Mr Storey intervened to point out the make-up of the integrated sector itself was not that well balanced. Mr Craig highlighted moral issues surrounding sacramental teachings, and he questioned the relevance of the Catholic certificate to the teaching of mathematics. Our call for a single education system, by the way, should not be perceived as a threat to the Catholic ethos. I would question, Deputy Speaker, if there is something about that in Catholic maintained schools which is good for their pupils, why should we not all want it for all our children? Michaela Boyle said the certificate had long outlived its sell-by date and gave a rare acknowledgement of the need for a single equality bill. Mr Colm Eastwood said it was not about discrimination but logic, and made a comparison with a football coach, ignoring the 1 in 5 rule we are proposing. He also seemed to find some hilarity within the debate, which I think has escaped the other members in the chamber today. Joanne Dobson highlighted that teachers in Northern Ireland are the only occupational group in the 27 member states of the European Union to be legally unprotected, and also pointed out Article 4 of the 2000 Directive, which requires individuals working for organisations to act in good faith and with loyalty to the organisation's ethos. Mr Allister had a question for the House. Does it have the appetite to address the misrepresentation regarding alleged discrimination down the years? And Mr Agnew highlighted a willingness to discriminate outside of the law. In conclusion, Deputy Speaker, what we're proposing is not an attack on any sector or any group. It's not the outright removal of the certificate, but a move towards equality with the protection of the 1 in 5 rule Mr Kinahan outlined. I believe it is a small step to advance towards a single education system and also a very important step to full and proper equality. I support the motion.